Today's episode is a success story, and it's about the sheikh of the architects in Egypt, the engineer Hassan Fathi. Engineer Hassan Fathi was born on March 23rd of the year 1900. He is a prominent Egyptian architect. He was born in the city of Alexandria and graduated from the Engineer Khana, currently the Faculty of Engineering at the First University, now Cairo University. The Gurna, which he built for 3,200 families, is part of the history of the popular building, which he founded in what is known as the architecture of the poor. Hassan Fathi is an international professor of three languages. He masters three languages, an engineer, an amateur musician, playwright, and inventor who has designed nearly 160 separate projects. His distinguished and very rich personality and his mastery of two foreign languages made it bring together multiple cultures. Hassan Fathi has used ancient design methods and materials in addition to knowing the economic situation in Egypt's countryside with extensive knowledge of architectural design techniques and ancient cities, and he trained local people to make their own materials and build their own buildings as well. Hassan Fathi developed and blossomed since his graduation in 1926 in an architectural environment and contemporary with many of the great architects such as Abu Bakr Khairat from the French school, Dr. Sayyid Iqraim from the Swiss school, and other senior architects who left imprints on the Egyptian architecture. But he differed from them by devising a curriculum that was related to the environmental architecture, especially rural architecture. He joined the teaching staff at the Higher College of Fine Arts in Zamalek in Cairo in the year 1946, and he was the first Egyptian member of the faculty there, as it was headed by a Frenchman, and only foreigners worked there. And he remained there for 16 years. Then he returned to it as head of the architecture department from the year 1952 to the year 1957. Engineer Hassan Fathi participated in designing as well as supervising the construction of schools for the Egyptian Ministry of Education, and he was convinced that designing buildings using traditional methods suitable for the region's climate, which would have spoken louder than words. And he moved to Athens to deal with international planners, to manage the principles of economic designs. He worked as a lawyer for conventional natural energy solutions in key community projects for Iraq and Pakistan. He has traveled and extensively researched the Future Cities program in Africa. In the year 1942, the artist Hamid Said designed the country house, the domed house, which is the same method in which he built the country house in Bahtim village for the Royal Society. In the year 1946, he was entrusted with designing the Gurna village, which was designed and considered to be the most important achievement for which he is known around the world. This village has a story included in the book Architecture of the Poor, which he issued in Arabic on the State Information Service in 1969, and the book was subsequently published in the United States of America in 1973. On the University of Chicago, under the title Architecture of the Poor, then it was published in Egypt in 1989 in English, also from the American University in Cairo. The village of New Qurna, west of Luxor, Egypt, began in 1946. The village of Qurna was internationally famous because of the book Architecture of the Poor, in which it tells the story of its construction. The village was established to accommodate the displaced from the areas of the ancient Egyptian cemeteries on the western mainland, to save them from thefts and encroachments on them, especially after specialists and archaeologists discovered that a stone inscription was completely stolen from one of the royal graves. So a decision was issued to displace them from the cemeteries and establish alternative housing for them. The state allocated a budget of £1 million to build the new village, and the site was chosen to be far from the archaeological areas and close to the railways and agricultural lands. Hassan Fathi started the first phase of the village building project by building 70 houses, so that each house has a distinctive characteristic from the others, so that the residents do not get confused. And he relied in the design of the houses on local materials and materials that appeared to be influenced by Islamic architecture. The domes had a unique design that were used instead of roofs, that relied on clapboards or the usual iron bars. An additional door has been allocated in the houses for the livestock that the residents of the area own, as a form of sanitary isolation in order to preserve the safety of individuals. 3 schools were built in the village, the first for boys and the second for girls. As for the third, it was a school to teach the handicrafts that the Gurna village was famous for, such as alabaster, spinning, weaving, and making palm products. He also tried through his school to preserve the Pharaonic spirit of creativity in new generations, such as just as Fathi was interested in the educational aspect, he did not overlook the religious aspect that characterizes the people of the village, or the entertainment aspect to compensate them for their homes that were forcibly displaced. As Fathi worked to construct a large mosque at the entrance to the village that carried the beautiful architectural inscriptions in his design, as he was influenced by the Tulunid architecture blending in with Islamic art in the Fatimid era, and with regard to the entertainment aspect, Fathi created a cultural palace bearing his name, a theater built in the Roman style, as well as a swimming pool. Fathi designed the mosques and school that was constructed of bricks and mud in Dar es Salaam, an educational center near Abec, New Mexico in the USA, and the main buildings were completed in 1981, and Dar es Salaam was inaugurated in 1982. Hassan Fathi left Egypt in 1959 to work for Doxiars Design and Construction in Athens, Greece, for 2 years, and then returned to Egypt again. Then between 1963 and 1965, he headed an experimental youth housing project under the Egyptian Ministry of Scientific Research. In 1966, he worked as an expert with the United Nations Organization in Development Projects in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. He worked as an expert at the Adelaide Inquiries Institute at the University of Chicago between 1975 and 1977. Since 1962, he has moved to his office in his home in Darb el-Labana in the citadel in Cairo, where his house has become a place of pilgrimage and a spot that everybody visits and a beacon for Egyptians and foreigners from all over the world. Hassan Fathi took a method and adhered to it. When he saw it, the Egyptian house abandoned its traditions, which linked it to the environment and its nature in construction, in furniture, and even customs. That is why architecture in ancient Egypt and in the Islamic Egypt had vaults on which the vertical rays of the sun were broken. As the global company Google celebrates his memory, the global company says that Hassan Fathi was interested in building communities more than building buildings, and that he was a pioneer in providing models for buildings that respect the traditions of places and take into account all aspects of life from Hassan Fathi that he said, there are 800 million poor people in the third world condemned to premature death due to poor housing, and these are my clients. I have the power and the means to comfort people. God will never forgive me for deliberately leaving them and raising a temperature inside the house by 17 degrees Celsius. That modernity does not necessarily mean vitality, and change is not always for the better. His publications modified Mashrabeya's story, A Tale of Two Villages, published by the Egyptian Ministry of Culture in 1961. The story of the Pays d'Utopie in La Revue du Caire, Architecture of the Poor book, Architecture and Environment book, Nature, Energy and Traditional Architecture, Principles and Examples of the Hot Dry Climate, United Nations University, Tokyo Air Foundation for Studies and Publishing, first edition, 1988. And he's saying God has created in every environment the materials that resist its problems and the architectural intelligence in dealing with the materials under his feet, because it is the material that resists the harsh environment of the place. The honorary positions modified member of the Supreme Council of Arts and Letters in Egypt, honorary member of the American Research Center Cairo, head of the International Round Circle Complex for planning Cairo's architecture on the occasion of its millennium, honorary member of the American Institute of Architecture, honorary chairman of the Permanent Conference of Egyptian Architects, the first 1985, the second 1986, the third 1987, and the fourth 1988. Member of the jury for the Aga Khan Award for Architecture from the year 1976 to 1980. Awards he received from Egypt in 1959, the State Incentive Prize for Fine Arts, the Gold Medal, for the design and implementation of the village of the New Qurna. (1959) Ministry of Educational Medal, 1960 Medal of the Egyptian Antiquities Authority, 1967 State Incentive Award for Fine Arts, and he was the first architect to receive that award, 1968 First Class Medal of Science and Arts. (1988) Memorial Prize of the Faculty of Fine Arts at Minya University, awarded international awards. 1980 President's Award, Aga Khan Award for Architecture, Pakistan, 1980. First Alternative Nobel Prize winner, Sweden. Hassan Fathy is the first Egyptian and Arab to receive the Alternative Nobel Prize from Sweden in the year 1980, a prize presented annually in the fields of human rights, sustainable development, health, education, peace, and environmental protection. 1980, Boston International Prize, Italy. 1984, first Gold Medal, International Federation of Architects in Paris, France. And the architect Sheikh Hassan Fathy passed away in 1989, leaving behind a history of architecture that was and still engraved in his name, and was able to engrave his name in the record of the top engineers in the world.